Miles from the ocean, deep in the heart of a moss-covered forest, stands a tree older than most civilizations. It's over 500 years old, its roots woven through stone, its bark darkened by centuries of rain and rot. But beneath its ancient skin lies a secret. Because if you take a sample of its wood and analyze it in a lab, you'll find something that shouldn't be there. A chemical fingerprint from a world it has never touched. Nitrogen-15. Nitrogen-15 is a heavy isotope. It's rare in terrestrial ecosystems, but it thrives in one place, the ocean. So how did it end up locked inside the rings of a mountaintop tree? This isn't just a biological anomaly, it's a forensic mystery. One that stretches across rivers, through bears, into corpses, and finally, into the heartwood of the forest. Because every year, like clockwork, a gruesome migration takes place. Millions of salmon leave the ocean, swim against the current, and die. Their bodies rot in the rivers, on the banks, and somehow beneath the branches of this very tree. The ocean should have ended at the shore, but instead, it climbs the mountains inside dead flesh and into living wood. To understand how a forest can be built from corpses, you have to follow the trail of death. This event is usually called a migration, but that word is far too gentle, too sanitized for what actually happens here. This isn't a journey, it's a mass funeral in motion. Every year, millions of salmon abandon the open sea and force themselves upstream. The moment they hit fresh water, they stop eating. From that second on, they are living on borrowed time. Their skin turns a bruised, dark red. Their jaws twist into grotesque hooks. Parasites burrow into open wounds, and white fungi bloom across their scales like a shroud. In some rivers, you can watch fish literally rotting while they're still swimming, their flesh dissolving even as they fight the current. And they keep going anyway. They slam themselves against jagged rocks. They hurl their bodies up vertical waterfalls, fighting currents strong enough to tear them backward. Fins shred, eyes cloud over. Entire schools are reduced to drifting, broken shapes. They aren't doing this to survive, they are doing it to reach the exact gravel bed where they were born. Their only remaining purpose is to spawn. And then, to die. The scale of this carnage is hard to fathom. Some rivers receive tens of thousands of tons of living biomass in just a few weeks. The water turns thick with bodies. The banks clog with those that didn't make it. Scavengers line the shore in a grim, expectant gallery. The stench of decay hangs over entire valleys, seeping into the soil and the needles of the trees above. This isn't just death happening in the forest. It's death arriving from the ocean in bulk. That is the key. The salmon run isn't random chaos. It's an energy pipeline. Every fish is a sealed package of nutrients forged in the abyss, fat, protein, phosphorus, and that telltale marine nitrogen being physically dragged inland against the pull of gravity. No root system could ever reach this far into the Pacific. No soil could ever extract this much life from salt water. So, the fish do it themselves, using their own bodies as the currency of transport. For a brief window every year, the border between ocean and land simply vanishes. Calories that once powered deep-sea predators are suddenly stranded miles inland. And once the run ends, the pipeline shuts down. No salmon means no delivery, and without that delivery, the forest begins to starve. Salmon don't make it into the forest on their own. They have help. Waiting along the riverbanks are the real gardeners of this ecosystem, the bears. But don't mistake them for mere predators. In this story, they are the transport system, the couriers. And their behavior is far more calculated than you'd think. A grizzly can catch dozens of salmon a day during the peak of the run, but they are surprisingly fastidious. They don't eat the whole fish. Instead, they go for the high-octane fuel, the brains, the eggs, the fatty skin. They gorge on the richest parts, then casually toss the rest aside. Crucially, they don't stay by the water. To avoid the heat of competition, they drag their prize deep into the timber. They carry these silver carcasses for hundreds of meters, up steep slopes, over fallen logs, through thickets of moss and fern just to eat in peace. When they're done, they leave behind the ruins, bones, flesh, scales. Over time, the forest floor becomes a sprawling, silent graveyard of salmon parts. But the bears aren't working alone. Foxes, wolves, ravens, and eagles all descend on the leftovers. Each takes a piece, each spreads the wealth further. What began as a concentrated mass of fish by the river becomes a dispersed field of death. And this is exactly what the forest has been waiting for. Those corpses aren't waste, they are liquid gold. Studies have shown that in forests flanking salmon streams, over 50% of the nitrogen in the plants and trees comes directly from the sea. In some individual trees, that number hits a staggering 80%. That's not a metaphor. It's a chemical reality. These aren't just trees growing in rich soil. These are trees built from flesh. This nutrient flow is structured, predictable, and ancient. Every year, the bears perform their duty. They harvest the river and deliver the ocean's dead into the forest's heart. They are gardeners who never plant a single seed. Instead, they bury fish. The strangest part? This doesn't just feed the forest, it carves its very shape. Trees closest to the salmon, delivery zones, grow taller, faster, and stronger. You can actually see the gradient of health. More salmon means more bears, which means more nutrients, which means more life. Even the next generation of grizzlies is tethered to this cycle. Cubs born after a massive salmon run are heavier, healthier, and far more likely to see their first birthday. When the salmon are scarce, the entire system feels the hunger. The forest itself bends around this delivery schedule. So, when you see a bear dragging a salmon into the dark underbrush, don't just see a predator having a meal. See maintenance. That bear is tending the forest the way a farmer tends his fields by feeding the earth that sustains him. And when those bones finally dissolve into the dirt, and the roots of an ancient cedar drink them in, that tree doesn't just grow. It remembers. The forest floor is now a patchwork of salmon corpses, rotting, dissolving, being picked apart by the relentless. But in this place, death is never an end. It is a transformation. The bodies are dismantled by a specialized team of decomposers, maggots, beetles, fungi, and microbes. What started as silver-scaled fish becomes a dark, nutrient-rich sludge. Flesh turns to soup, bones flake into a fine powder, and the elements forged in the salt of the sea, nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, are finally surrendered to the earth. The soil drinks it deep, the trees reach for it. Roots tap into the dirt like hungry veins. They absorb the remnants of what were once living, breathing animals. Inside the xylem, that oceanic cocktail travels upward, climbing through the trunk, pulsing into the branches, and finally settling into the leaves. Within days, the ocean is alive again. But this time, it is suspended in the air. Scientific studies have traced that specific marine nitrogen 1,5 signature in everything from forest moss to the delicate feathers of a hummingbird. The salmon become the very architecture of the forest. Bark, sap, fruit, all of it. When a tree near a salmon run is tested and found to be 80% marine-derived nitrogen, we have to stop and think. These trees aren't just growing with the ocean's help, they are growing out of it. This isn't poetic license, this is biochemical reality. When a salmon dies on land, it becomes a tree. It is reincarnation by decomposition. The forest doesn't just accept the corpses, it consumes them until it is them. The giants standing here are more than just old, tall timber. They are the ghosts of the ocean. What's truly unsettling is how quietly the transition occurs. There is no fanfare, no sudden burst of color, just an invisible chemical relay. Fungi stretch their hyphae through fish, flesh, and directly into tree roots. Microisal networks act as a living switchboard, passing nutrients between species, cedars feeding on salmon, mosses soaking up the signature of seawater. Even the animals carry the signal. Insects that fed on the rot are eaten by birds, who then fertilize the ground miles away. The isotopes spread, mapping the shape of life far from the tide. The ocean is no longer a destination, it is a substance, woven into the very tissue of the wilderness. This entire ecosystem has evolved to expect death. It waits for the signal. The rotting of flesh isn't decay. It's a cue for microbes to awaken, for roots to activate, for the world to feed. Without this gruesome delivery, the rhythm falters. The trees slow their growth, the animals struggle to breed, the system stalls. To the untrained eye, it's just a normal forest. But if you could see the chemical signatures glowing in the dark, you'd see the truth. You'd see a forest built from flesh, you'd see the sea living inside the trees. This forest is alive, but it doesn't stand alone. Every towering cedar, every moss-draped branch, every whispering fern, they all owe their existence to an ancient agreement written in blood and decay. The trees here don't just remember the ocean, they rely on it. Every year, they wait for death to arrive. They wait for the salmon to hurl themselves against the current, for the bears to drag silver flesh into the underbrush, and for the microbes to unlock the treasures hidden within. If the salmon disappear, the forest begins to starve. The trees grow slower, the birds lay fewer eggs, and the bears grow thin. Everything falters. Because in this world, without death, there is no delivery, and without delivery, there can be no growth. This is the ghost connection, an invisible lifeline stretching from the salt of the sea to the soul of the soil, carried on the back of a massive, seasonal sacrifice. If you ever find yourself standing beneath a massive tree in the Pacific Northwest, look up and remember, you aren't just looking at wood. It's memory, it's ocean, it's ghosts. Protecting the salmon run isn't just about the fish. It's about defending a ritual that feeds entire worlds. Without this ancient procession of death, the very heart of the ecosystem stops beating. So, the next time you walk through one of these forests, stop and listen. The sea is still there, miles from the shore, humming inside the bark. You just have to learn how to hear it.